PMS, pregnancy, menopause. Each stage of womanhood has its unique challenges. That's why Highlands Naturals' new women's multivitamins are formulated with essential daily nutrients, plus targeted support for your life stage. Facing PMS? There's a Highlands Multi for that. Navigating pregnancy and morning sickness? That too. In the throes of menopause, our formula is here to support you through hot flashes and skin changes. Gone are the days of juggling multiple supplements or guessing what you might need. With Highlands Naturals, it's one multivitamin with daily essential nutrients and science-backed ingredients to support you. An all-in-one wellness solution to lighten the load for women? Highlands Naturals is here for it. Find your multi at Amazon or Highlands.com. That's HYLANDS.com. Highlands Naturals. We're here for it.
CuriosityStream is the streaming service for people who want to know more. And now check out Curiosity's new series, Queens of Ancient Egypt. When pharaohs held the throne, their wives held the power.
We see her taking precedence over the pharaoh, an absolute mastermind.
All hail the queens.
This is unprecedented.
Watch Queens of Ancient Egypt now on CuriosityStream. With monthly, annual, and bundled plans, find the one that works for you at CuriosityStream.com.
If you really like this episode, please support our podcast by going to patreon.com/truecrimewives and get lots of great extras.
Good Wife's Guide to True Crime. We discuss crimes that some may find disturbing. Listener discretion is advised.
In the last two episodes, you've heard what the general public has heard about the Scott Peterson case and Colleen's plea for his innocence. Tonight, I'm going to present the things I believe really indicate that Scott is 100% guilty of the murder of his wife, Lacey, and unborn son, Connor. I'm not going to go over the whole timeline again or evaluate the trial. My case is built more on psychology and the behaviors of Scott himself.
An inmate at the California State Prison, San Quentin. This call and your telephone number will be monitored and recorded.
You want to talk about the verdict first? It was crazy. There was just like this amazing, horrible physical reaction that I had. I couldn't feel my feet on the floor. I couldn't feel the chair I was sitting in. My vision was even a little blurry. And I just had this weird sensation that I was falling forward and down, and there was going to be no end to this falling forward and down, like there was no floor to land on. I was staggered by it. I had no idea it was coming.
The case of State versus Scott Peterson, to me, feels like it just happened yesterday.
We begin the news with a holiday mystery in the Central Valley.
Lacey went missing Christmas Eve. She's 27 years old, and she is over 8 months pregnant.
24/7 news is entertainment. Like any good entertainment, there's a formula for winning over the audience. Find a defendant who's enviable.
O.J. Simpson is sitting in the back seat, and he has a gun at his head.
Are they wealthy? Martha Stewart, Kenneth Lay. Are they powerful? Scooter Libby or, Gary Condit. Are they someone who depends on their popularity for their livelihood? Kobe Bryant.
I'm innocent.
Michael Jackson.
The media has dissected and manipulated these allegations to reach their own conclusions.
And probably most importantly, are they attractive? Or is the victim attractive? And, that's Scott Peterson and Lacey Peterson.
The Peterson case has now taken on celebrity status.
A story of sex, lies, so many lies, and yes, murder.
Hey, Dan. Dan, you can see the press that is around here. There's quite the throng of people.
He didn't look like he was grieving.
They discovered there was another woman in his life.
We did have a romantic relationship.
Everybody likes an inspirational story, but what makes you tune in to watch a show day after day after day is because you're angry. To me, that was the formula.
Find the defendant, Scott Lee Peterson, guilty of the crime of murder.
With a great big smile on his face. Well, guess what, Scotty?
San Quentin's your new home.
And it's illegal to kill your wife and child in California.
Hey folks, it's time to grab your glass of wine because Good Wives Fancy, Tori, Colleen, and Christina are about to serve up another true crime case.
When I think of the murder of Lacey and Connor Peterson, I basically was operating under the impression that everyone thought he was guilty and he got exactly what he deserved. I've discussed his case with people quite often, and not one person ever expressed doubt. So you have to understand my complete surprise when our team was discussing what cases we wanted to discuss on this podcast and over on our YouTube channel, Murder by Design, that Colleen would drop a bomb on us stating she thought he was innocent. I was honestly, literally, and I do mean literally, Tori, speechless, and that never happens. Since that day, it has boggled my mind because to me, it's so blatantly shut and closed that I just can't fathom her suggestion of innocence. I still believe he's guilty as the day is long, and honestly, though I question his sentencing to death, I agree with the fact he is where he belongs. So tonight, I'm going to give you the reasons why I have never questioned this case even one time.
I'm like you. From the beginning, I never really questioned that if he was innocent or not. From what I saw, I believed he was guilty, and I just, like you, I thought everybody agreed with that. But I also never looked deeply into his case. So I wanted to hear everything that Colleen had to say, and now I'm going to listen to your side, and I'm going to look into things on both sides before I come to my final decision.
All right. That's fair.
I am in the majority that I also, from the beginning, thought he was absolutely guilty. But also, like Christina, I really didn't pay attention to the case very much. I didn't look into it very deep. So I did pay really close attention to everything Colleen had to say. And just so you know, she did bring up some points that I do want to look into further. Now, that does not mean she swayed me. That does not mean she changed my mind. But it does mean she brought up some things that make me want to look into this case a little bit more and make up my own decision. So you're not fighting to change my mind like she was. And I made it clear to her, I was like, you got your job cut out for you, just so you know. So you're not fighting to change my mind like she was, but you do have those little bit of not doubts that I have in my mind from listening to her, but those little things that have me questioning a little bit more of what I'm looking into that you'll be fighting against.
I mean, I think she did a good job. I listened to some of it, and I think she did a good job of, putting some questions out there that I hadn't looked at myself, And I guess my contention I guess where I'm sitting at this point is that I definitely still think he's guilty, and I think that what I'm going to present tonight really kind of solidified it for me even more when I did this research. But I do have questions about the death penalty for him. Now, I personally, I think we all agree that we believe in the death penalty, but there has to be pretty big circumstances surrounding it for us to say, yes, okay, he should be put to death. But I also believed for the longest time that I thought that the death penalty was warranted based on the fact of the death of the baby, and how that I felt that was kind of the kicker for why he got the death penalty. I don't know that if he just killed Lacey and she was just a wife that he killed, would he have gotten the death penalty? I'm not sure. So, I mean, and they've turned that over now, but I don't know if that happened recently, but I don't know if that has more to do with the fact that they really believe he shouldn't have the death penalty, or if it has more to do with the fact that, California really isn't putting anybody to death anymore because Newsom has put this, ban on the death penalty or moratorium on the death penalty penalty for right now, So I don't know if like that was truly, oh yeah, no, we totally see your point that he doesn't deserve the death penalty or not. That's just my thoughts on that.
Don't go anywhere. The Good Wives will be right back.
If you've been listening to our podcast for some time, then you've probably noticed that there's been some different changes going on. And that's because we've recently switched over to our new hosting platform using Buzzsprout. And we love it. It could not have been a smoother transition. Buzzsprout has made it super simple and gave us amazing features we weren't getting before. So if you've been thinking of hosting a podcast or you're looking for a new host, then we totally recommend giving Buzzsprout a try. Buzzsprout is hands down the easiest and best way to launch, promote, and track your podcast. Your show can be online and listed in all the major podcast directories like Apple, Spotify, Google, and even Pandora within minutes of finishing your recording. So join over 100,000 podcasters already using Buzzsprout to get their message out to the world. And if you follow the link in the show notes, that lets Buzzsprout know we sent you. And it helps you get a $20 Amazon gift card if you sign up for a paid plan. And it helps support our show.
In every episode, we like to serve up a special dish from the state that our crime takes place. So here's our resident Cajun Mama Ty to tell you what our true crime dish of the week is.
Hey guys, it's me, Cajun Mama Ty, and I am here back with another California favorite recipe. Yes, the Good Wives are still in California. We have one more episode to go after today, and this is a good, easy recipe, fast, quick, and easy. So I have what's called a spicy curried sweet potato soup. It is very few ingredients, very few minutes to plan and get ready. 10-minute cooking time, 10-minute prep time, and it's easy to do. So let's go ahead and head back to the Good Wives as we listen to them debate on the Scott Peterson case, and we head back in a few minutes to hear our California curry sweet potato soup.
Well, before I get into the case itself, I wanted to take some time to speak about the killer spouse, especially two types of spousal killers: the pregnancy killer and the temper tantrum killer. In my research, I found an incredible book that discussed these types of killers called Till Death Do Us Part: Love, Marriage, and the Mind of the Killer Spouse. And in this book, the writers Dr. Robbie Ludwig and Matt Birkbeck explain several different types of killer spouses. And I actually reached out to Robbie, Dr. Ludwig, and I heard back from her, and I'm really hoping that we'll be able to get her on the show before we wrap up this season. She did say she would be glad to talk with us, so I'm hoping that I'll get to have her on so she can even give more in-depth explanations of some of the concepts that I'm going to go into here. So one of the big things is in pregnancy killers, and I'm going to talk about the pregnancy killer first and then go back to the temper tantrum killer, because Scott kind of goes in both categories. But I mostly kind of put him in the pregnancy killer just because of Lacey's pregnancy, but the temper tantrum killer very much fits him as well. So I think it's kind of a cross between the two. So one of the big things I wanted to talk about first was stressors of pregnancy. So even people in the best of situations can experience some form of anxiety and worry when a pregnancy is confirmed. TVs, movies, and media tend to romanticize pregnancy. They make it seem like a child fixes any problem and only perfect couples enter into parenthood. Now, occasionally, they will show a more truthful depiction of the times when pregnancy is not what the individuals plan and what that brings with it. But a lot of times I find that that's like, those are comedies. They're not serious pieces, unless you're talking about like teen pregnancy. And then, that's a whole different thing. But let's just for a moment say that the pregnancy is a happy one. It still doesn't eliminate high emotional thoughts of, will I be a good parent? Are we stable enough financially to support this baby? What if I turn out to be like my parents? What if I'm not as good as my parents? And the big one is, mostly for guys, like, what if my life is over? So according to Dr. Ludwig, oftentimes pregnancy can bring up insecurities or problems one has with their own parents. And so that it plays into it too. In the case of Scott Peterson, a plausible thought to evaluate is the one of, what if my life is over? Scott was a sociable guy. He enjoyed flashy material things and showing off the hot woman on his arm, the big house, the ideal marriage. And though he may have originally expressed his excitement over having a son, as the time got closer, it showed that he wasn't ready to be done with his pleasures of life, and a pregnant wife didn't fit into those pleasures. Everyone, no matter when they decide to have a baby, is not ready. I once told a friend that kept saying, well, we just aren't financially ready, or it's not a good time, that she was never going to be ready no matter how much she prepared or made as a salary or had a big enough vehicle or house, etc. So if she really wanted to have children, she should just go for it. She didn't heed my advice and regretted it later when it proved hard to have her only child and she was unable to have any more because she had waited too long. She called me crying and said she should have listened to me because I was right. They weren't ready when they had baby number one, but they figured it out. But sadly, there would be no baby number two. So financial burdens often hit the male partner more than the female, because though we've come so far as a society in equal rights, the men are still often looked at as breadwinners and the women are the caregivers. And it's kind of in our nature. So men are more affected by losing their freedom. It's why so many men desert and women are left raising children alone. But in the case of pregnancy killers, the idea of leaving the family is failure and they choose other options. According to a study published in the Journal of American Medical Association, pregnant women are more likely to die of homicide than any other cause. So one of the scariest things about this is these men who commit these types of murders rarely exhibit any warning signs. According to Dr. Ludwig, these type of killers often do not fit any particular forensic profile, crossing all racial barriers and economic classes. So while Scott could absolutely fall under the heading of a pregnancy killer, he more likely is what is called a temper tantrum killer, with just a few pieces of pregnancy killer tendencies. The temper tantrum killer is a person who never quite matured past a world that revolved around them. They often have a disorder called intermittent explosive disorder, and this is generally found in men, and they are prone to a lack of impulse control, have aggressive outbursts under extreme duress, and are typically very controlling. And Scott fits both these labels to a T, and in my mind, that is a recipe for disaster.
So you said that the temper tantrum killer, that they have a disorder called the intermittent explosive disorder?
Yes.
So is that something they're diagnosed with ahead of time with something, and that they've noticed that this is something in common, or is this something assumed after the fact, after they've been incarcerated and talked with psychologists, psychiatrists? And what leads to that particular diagnosis? What are some of the, you did list lack of impulse control, aggressive outbursts,
yes.
Controlling. Now, I have an ex that fits those three, but I don't know that he necessarily would have intermittent explosive disorder. And I don't necessarily know if he would be a temper tantrum killer, So what would lead to that diagnosis versus just anger management issues?
Okay, so according to Dr. Ludwig, she explains it as Some adults who suffer from a lack of control are diagnosed with this intermittent explosive disorder. It's a psychological problem defined by extreme problems with impulse control. Like I said, they are prone to aggressive outbursts under extreme duress. They actually perceive the stress as a threat or an insult or some sort of vulnerability or a combination of all those things. And it's even said that there may be some sort of soft neurological findings of unusual brainwave patterns. But it's normally triggered when perceived needs are not met. So in the case of Scott, Scott was, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit later in how he was brought up, but Scott was the kind of guy who was given everything he ever wanted. He never was questioned. His parents, treated him like a little prince because he was the baby. So he grew up believing that the world is all about him. And that's one of the things that she even said is these are people who never developed past that. Because as a kid, you think that way. The world is all about you, because your world is very small. But as we get older, we become more aware that the world really isn't at all about you. And it's really kind of, you're the small piece in this whole big thing, right? But these are people that genuinely have never moved past that. I don't know. I don't know. Let me see if I can see here.
Calling all night owls. When you've got the after dark munchies, Amigos is here for you to satisfy your late night cravings. Put your hunger to bed with Amigos' new 8 to close specials. Only $5 for 2 crisp meat burritos, 2 cheesy burritos, or 1 of each, for those who can't decide. You heard right. 2 of our favorite late night sellers, crisp meats or cheesies for just $5. Head to Amigos, where flavor never sleeps.
As a contractor who works in road construction, you wouldn't forget to wear your safety gear on a job site. And you wouldn't forget to stay away from falling debris. And you certainly wouldn't forget to keep heavy equipment away from trench edges. This is just as important. Never dig without calling 811 first. It's not just about the call. It's about saving lives. Know what's below. Call or click 811 each time you dig. Alliant Energy, powering beyond.
It's basically that they've acquired experiences early in life when bad behaviors were tolerated, and these behaviors continue into adulthood. So it's not necessarily something that they were may not have been diagnosed with before, but when they're talking about it, what they do is they're not evaluating the actual murder, but the type of person and the type of things that this person exhibits leading up to this murder, if that makes any more sense. Did I answer your question good enough?
Yeah, I think you did.
Okay.
I have a question also relating. I get the world revolving around him and how he grew up, but in terms of the impulse control, aggressive outbursts, and being very controlling, other than the cheating, did we hear during any part of the case that Scott was prone to those behaviors at all as an adult?
I know that he had some impulse control with, like you said, besides just cheating, but with sexual impulses in general, I believe.
Oh yes, all the porn. Yes.
Right. Okay, the porn. Right, and then also, he did seem like he was a very controlling person of Lacey. He kind of just wanted, her to be home and taking care of him. And I'm going to get into why the baby poses a threat to him in a little bit here. And I do know that there were some outbursts of things that happened, but I can't recall exactly. I'd have to look them up, and perhaps, that's something that our viewers would be interested in going and looking up, is if there was some specific concrete stuff about him being. Now, Dr. Ludwood does talk about a little bit of it, and she goes through the case. So there are some things that I'll be speaking about specifically. So.
Don't go anywhere. The Good Wives will be right back.
This episode has been sponsored by the Oliphant Institute. The Good Wives have been actively taking criminal justice courses at Oliphant Institute. Our good friend Stephen David Lampley, who is one of our regular guests on our YouTube channel Murder by Design, is a 24-year retired SVU detective and the founder of the Institute. Stephen himself teaches each class, and they are no longer than an hour. They're super informative and very interesting, and you can't beat the price as each class only costs $20. If you're interested in learning more about serial killers, human decomposition, and many other criminal justice topics, but don't really care about a degree, then the Oliphant Institute is the right place for you. Head on over to oliphantinstitute.com. That's OLIPHANT institute.com and get registered for a class today.
Hey guys, it's me, Cajun Mama Ty, and I am back to give you the full-on recipe of our California spicy curry sweet potato soup. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to start with the ingredients. We want to get 3 large sweet potatoes, peeled and chopped. We need 2 cups of beef broth. We need a cup of unsweetened coconut milk, small shallots minced, 2 tablespoons of grade B maple syrup, 2 teaspoons of curry powder, 1 teaspoon of sea salt, 1 teaspoon of chili powder, and 1 teaspoon of Spanish smoked paprika. If you can't find the Spanish smoked paprika, you can just use regular paprika. So what we're going to do is we're going to combine the sweet potatoes and the beef broth in a pot. We want to cook it over a medium heat until the sweet potatoes are tender. Usually takes about 10 to 15 minutes. Then you want to smash the potatoes into the broth using a potato smasher. Once that is done, you want to mix in the coconut milk, the shallots, the maple syrup, the curry powder, the sea salt, the chili, the paprika. Mix that all together into the sweet potato mixture. Cook and stir until the heat is all the way through, around 10 to 15 minutes. You want to reduce the heat to low. Blend the soup with a hand blender. You want to go ahead and blend it. You want to puree the soup until it's completely like soupy. For your vegetarian eaters, you could substitute the beef broth for vegetable broth. And if you want to avoid the sodium in your diet, instead of using the teaspoon of sea salt, use a half of a teaspoon of salt. So that is how you cook it. You can serve this with avocados. You cut avocados and you put the avocados on top. A little curry. You can put a little bit of more curry powder on it if you like the curry powder taste. But it is a sweet potato soup, and it is very delicious. It is good. You can even put some little bay leaves in it to give it that extra flavor. And that's it. And enjoy your soup. Let's head back to the Good Wives as they continue talking about the Scott Peterson case. We'll be back. If by any chance you guys have any recipes or are interested in sending any French words you'd like to know about, please drop me a line at my email address, which is CajunMamaTie, CajunMommaTie @gmail.com. You can also go on to our Patreon account. You will find all the recipes that I cover on all our podcasts are there, as well as my email address so that you can come on and send me emails and let me know how I'm doing and let me know if there's anything that you guys want to know about. See you later, and let's head back to the Good Wives.
Ty, another great recipe. For the full recipe that was shared tonight, join us at our exclusive membership club at www.patreon.com/truecrimewives.
So on the exterior, Scott and Lacey appeared to be a perfect couple. They met in college, fell in love, and settled down to start a family. But like all things, nothing is really as it seems on the surface. Under the strikingly attractive couple next door, there was lots of trouble bubbling up to the surface, and on Christmas Eve 2002, it boiled over. The fascination with this case stems a lot from this facade. It made each of us think, how well do we know anyone, even family? What goes on when the doors are closed to the outside world? We really don't know until it smacks us in the face, and oh boy, did Scott Peterson do that. And, you know, I think about that all the time. Like, you never really know what's going on. You know, we talk about it a lot in my experience with network marketing about, you know, the highlight reel of social media, you know, and these people that put out this happy couple, everything's fantastic, my life is fabulous. And then, you know, they're struggling. Or even looking at like Chris Watts and Shanann, you know, and that's that same kind of dynamic. Is this, you know, she made sure that the whole life was just perfect, you know, and I think in this case, Scott was that way more than Lacey, but, you know, they kind of just put out this very wonderful, very happy couple. And obviously, if he's cheating on her and he's doing these different things, and then I honestly can say there's got to be other problems at home in my mind, you know. Scott was the only son of Lee and Jackie Peterson. There were several half siblings, but he was the baby and was treated as a little prince, and he could do no wrong, and this gave him a very skewed view of the world. This made Scott think he was special and the world owed him anything he wanted. It also made him have the false sense that rules did not apply to him. All the things that made Scott attractive to Lacey and others are things that are covering up deep, low self-control and egocentricity and low self-esteem. So he put on a face for the world of a charismatic, charming guy, but it's totally fake. He falls into the categories of sociopathic and narcissistic. He is incapable of having true, meaningful emotions or connections, but he can mimic these type of behaviors. But under the surface, he is empty, and it's up to the people in his life to fill him up. And when they fail to do so, the fallout is intense, and rage can manifest in a split second. This murder, which seemingly came out of nowhere, is actually something that had been brewing for quite some time. There were warning signs if you look back, but like they say, hindsight is 20/20. Scott had a short-sighted approach to life, and he lacked good judgment or long-term planning skills. He avoided pain at all costs, and he was a person looking for instant gratifications and pleasures. And all his charms and charisma helped to mask these behaviors, but they were clearly there. Men who kill their wives typically don't kill anyone else. Generally, these men see these women and their lives as like an extension of them, their property, and they can easily just trade them in like an old car, which is kind of what he was doing with all these women. You know, he was able to, you know, put on a totally different persona for each one of them. And, you know, he's describing himself as a single bachelor who's a horn dog to one. And, you know, I don't know what he told the others as far as things go, but I would imagine he changed to fit each circumstance. That's kind of what these guys are like. They're able to be kind of like chameleons. because
right.
they don't
so I have a.
Okay,
go ahead. Finish your sentence.
I was gonna say, because they don't have actually any like real personality or anything that is actually really them. It's all a show.
Right. Well, I was going to say, you said that they don't when they kill their wives, they don't typically kill anyone else.
Mm-hmm.
And it just, in my mind, I thought of a Black Widow, the woman that kills husband after husband after husband.
Right.
Would that be the same kind of thing? Or do the men typically just kill once and then hope to get away with it? Or do you tend to see Black Widows in that sense as well?
There are male Black Widows. And I know that in the book that I read, she actually talks about it. However, I didn't read that chapter because it didn't really apply to this case. But there are Black Widow males, and in fact, we interviewed somebody, Julie Burnett, who we're actually producing her podcast that's coming out real soon called Out of the Bag. She experienced that with a guy who was a former police officer, and she believes that he actually did kill his first wife and get her to make it look like a suicide, and then he tried to do the same thing to her, and she said she heard after she left him that he had tried to do that again with some others. There are a couple other cases that I've heard of this, where they kill several wives. Drew Peterson was another one that they suspect did that, so there are a couple that I know of personally, but it does happen more than you would think. But it's generally, in the case of these guys, it's when the family unit or the mother or whatever lets them down in some way. So it reminds me of a movie that I saw, like, I think it was in the 80s. Now they've done some remakes of it, I'm sure, but it was called The Stepfather.
I was just about to mention that. I think it was in the 90s, actually.
Yeah, 80s or 90s. I don't remember.
There were 2 or 3 different ones, but yeah, I was about to mention that movie too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that movie was super. I mean, I loved that movie. I thought it was super interesting. But in that movie, if you want to tell Tori, you can. But otherwise, I'll just explain it. It doesn't matter.
In that movie, or in the movie series, there was a gentleman that would work his way into a family with a single mom, and she always had to have a child. But he would work his way in, and he would be this perfect boyfriend. And then they would get married, and he would be the perfect husband. Everything would be wonderful until somebody came along that questioned him or his past. And then those people started disappearing. And then when those people started disappearing, the family generally would either walk in on something or ask him a question about something. And then he would murder the whole family, pack up, disappear, go far away, and start the cycle over almost immediately.
Sometimes he had them at the same time.
And sometimes, right, sometimes in the movie he had the second family going because he could feel the first family starting to fall apart.
Right.
So,
right.
Yeah, that made me think of that movie as well.
Yeah, I thought of that too, because that was one of my most favorite horror movies, or just like, I guess it was before they were called psychological thrillers. It was a psychological thriller, but back then we just kind of called all of that horror movies, but yeah, I mean, that was one of my favorites as a teenager. Watching that, I loved that movie. So, and that movie series, I think I watched all of them. It was interesting. It was really interesting. Anyway, so all of the psychology above plays into my ideas of Scott Peterson's guilt. As I said before, I'm not going to take you through the timelines or the ins and outs of the trial. I'm mainly focusing on Scott's behaviors before and after the disappearance of Lacey and ultimately her murder. So one of the common fantasies of the temper tantrum killer and the pregnancy killer is that they want their wife dead. They don't necessarily start off fantasizing that they are going to kill their wives, but perhaps they think about what it would be like to have a dead wife and the return of the freedom they desperately long for. So that's what these guys are striving for, is freedom in these cases. And so Scott Peterson never considered leaving Lacey, because even in doing that, in the end, there would still be a child that would rob him of his money, his freedom, his fun, and his life. So while having a mistress in of itself does not prove or even indicate that a man is going to kill his wife, it makes you a sleazeball, but not necessarily a murderer. However, in Scott's case, it's not the mistress that is the problem. It's the things he said to her. He told Amber Fry a few weeks before his wife died that she was already dead, and this would be the first Christmas without her. He calls her from his wife's vigil, his missing, pregnant wife's vigil, the mother of his unborn child's vigil, a woman who, even if you hate, is missing, and she is the mother of your child, and says he is standing in Paris in front of the Eiffel Tower. And that's not a guy that's just having an affair like the multiple affairs he already had. That, my friends, was him living out his fantasy to the fullest extent. Not only was he...
So I want to interrupt you here and ask another question.
Sure.
You said you listened to some of Colleen's podcast. You may not have listened to all of it, but she actually addressed that same rumor that he spoke with Amber during the vigil. And she said that according to phone records, he actually spoke to her. And Christina, you may need to help me remember here specifically, but that he either spoke to her 2 or 3 hours before or 2 or 3 hours after, based on phone records and timestamps, that it was not from the vigil itself.
I think she said a few hours before, and then also maybe a little bit after the vigil, he spoke with her again. But she said it absolutely was not during the vigil.
Right. So that my question is, where are you finding the information? And I questioned her the same way, but where did you find the information that it was actually during the vigil?
From the book written by the prosecuting attorney and the defense attorney.
Calling all night owls. When you've got the After Dark munchies, Amigos is here for you to satisfy your late night cravings. Put your hunger to bed with Amigos' new 8 to close specials. Only $5 for 2 crisp meat burritos, 2 cheesy burritos, or 1 of each, for those who can't decide. You heard right. 2 of our favorite late night sellers, crisp meats or cheesies, for just $5. Head to Amigos, where flavor never sleeps.
At Baker's, we know the minute a tomato is picked, the fresh timer starts. The sooner we get our produce to you, the fresher it is. That's why we've shortened the time from harvest to home for our tasty tomatoes, strawberries, and salads. So no matter how you shop, you have more time with your fresh produce. Baker's, fresh for everyone.
We've locked in low prices to help you save big store-wide. Look for the locked in low prices tags and enjoy extra savings throughout the store. Baker's, fresh for everyone.
So both books said it in there. Both books. Both the defense attorney and the prosecuting attorney put that in their books that I read. Okay. And it was in the court documents, obviously. So I don't know where,
well, that's something our listeners are more than welcome to look up that detail and make a decision for themselves. I just wanted to, because it was such a difference between you and what Colleen said. I asked her the same thing, where she got her information. And to be honest, it's been a week. I have a handful of kids, so I don't remember her answer, but I wanted to just, find out where you got yours as well.
I can speak to this. Let's just say, let's give Colleen the benefit of the doubt and that she has some sort of, evidence that shows that it was before or after. It's still on the day that his wife's vigil is happening. And he's talking to her before the vigil and after the vigil. Like, that's still, in my mind, really awful. And the main point of this isn't even the timeline of when he had this conversation with her. It is more of the fact that he is able to make up such a large lie, and I'm standing in front of the Eiffel Tower, and he lays it on thick with her. It's so beautiful, honey. I wish you were here with me. I can't wait to bring you here. While even if, like you're saying, if Colleen is correct, it was before or after, I don't care which one or both, then it's still the same idea that this is something that he is able to do and do very well. And he gives no care about this fact that his wife is missing or that there is a vigil happening for his wife, because he's more interested in impressing his new girlfriend.
Right. And I get that. And I said, I'm not going to state my opinion on that myself, because that's for our listeners to make up their own thoughts. But I just I was just questioning because it was so different. I just wanted to hear where you got your information as well. That's all.
Sure. But like I said, I think mine is more about the psychological aspect and the lying than anything else. So that's the biggest thing.
Absolutely, I understand that.
Yeah. So what I was saying is this is not a guy that's just like having an affair. This is like, him actually living out his fantasy to the fullest extent. So not only was he free from responsibilities, he had a beautiful young girl to care for him during his grieving hour. He was being paid the attention he felt he deserved and knew Lacey would not be able to give him once Connor came along. So he felt like he was actually falling out of Lacey's grace, because she had already started showing different things of, putting the baby first, and she can't come and do these different things. She can't run these errands or do this. Maybe you have to walk the dog because I can't do it anymore. Which supposedly, she wasn't able to walk the dog anymore. So by the fact that he said that she was walking the dog was suspect in itself. But these things played into him believing that in some way this baby was going to replace him. And that this baby was going to take away the absolute adoration that he loves about, that was attractive in Lacey, was that she adored him and she loved him and she hung on his every word, and he did all kinds of little things to get her into that. Like, he's sending her love letters in college, and they were just so thoughtful and caring. And so he really was beginning to feel like she was going to push him aside.
Don't go anywhere. The Good Wives will be right back. So you often hear and see us Good Wives sipping a glass of wine. And one of our favorite wine clubs is California Wine Club. California Wine Club only works with small wineries, and they hand select 2 bottles of wine each month and ship them straight to your door. Now you don't even have to go to the liquor store to have a sip of bubbly with us. How cool is that?
We absolutely love hearing from our listeners, and we'd like to invite you to send us a question for us to answer or a case you'd like us to cover. You can drop us an email at goodwivesdish@gmail.com, and we might feature it in one of our next episodes and give you a shout out. Right now, we are also hosting our #LoveWins Scholarship Fund. If you're a college-age student who would like to enter, send us a 30-second video telling us about how you lead with love. Email your entry to us with a little bio about yourself and your educational goals. And if you'd like to learn more about our #LoveWins campaign for peace, merchandise, or donation details, go check out our informational video on youtube.com/murderbydesign. We look forward to hearing from you.
It's always the parents' fault. And, I want to get into that. Like, it's always, whenever you talk about psychology, what does it do? It always goes back to, well, what was your childhood like? Or what was your mom like? Or did your father make you feel this way? Or your mother do this? It always goes back to that. But the reason for that is because a lot of our adult things that are our idiosyncrasies and neuropathies come from the childhood and how that person was raised. And I'm not saying that's an excuse. I'm simply saying in this instance, it actually plays into the very type of person that he is. And in this instance, I'm not quite sure whether he was, a sociopath because he grew up this way, or if he was just born a sociopath. But if he was just born a sociopath, his parents didn't help that situation in any shape or form. So, but much of Scott's frustration was that the baby was changing not only his life, but the way his partner was behaving. As Lacey neared the end of her pregnancy, she began to be less forgiving of Scott's little indiscretions and idiosyncrasies. She was becoming more demanding that he help her get ready for a baby that he wasn't all that gung-ho about in the first place. Connor hadn't even arrived yet, and he was slowly becoming less the center of her universe, and he was unprepared to deal with that. He felt a noose tightening around his neck that made him feel that his life as he knew it and desperately was trying to achieve was dying. So Scott being the youngest meant that he never had to deal with a pregnancy in his family. So, and I'm sure you're kind of experiencing this right now, Tori, with Malachi. You had told me, he's 2 and he is experiencing some jealousy of the baby, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he won't share me. I am only his mom. I'm not even the baby's mom.
Mm-hmm.
And the baby is only his brother. He won't share the baby with anybody else.
Mm-hmm.
He keeps telling me I'll pick him up to feed him, and it's put babe Rome down right now.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because he wants to sit in my lap. Pick me up, Mom, right now.
Right. Right.
And he's not typically, he's not a bratty. I'm
no,
one of those moms that if my kid is a brat, I'll tell you in a heartbeat, dude,
Mm-hmm.
you're being a brat,
Right.
I don't coddle my kids in any way like that, but he's very much showing kind of that attitude right now, because he was the baby for 2 years. He was the youngest. Right. There is a 9-year age difference between him and his closest sibling.
And I would assume
before
that
the baby.
I would even assume that even the closest sibling that's 9 years older is experiencing some amount of jealousy on both of these, because
absolutely.
She was the baby for 9 years.
Right. She was the baby. And she was 4 years younger than her closest sibling. And my kids are spread out. My oldest is, for those of you that don't know very much about me, my oldest will be 20 in just a couple of months. And my youngest will be 5 months next week. So we're talking 20 years and 5 months. And there's 6 of them spread out between there. So, we call, in our house, we rarely call them by their names. We jokingly call them by the number. So I'm like, hey, number 4, come here,
So you're the Umbrella Academy of moms,
Kind of, yes. Yeah. Only I've been doing that since before the Umbrella Academy. So I claim that one. She definitely was showing some signs of jealousy when the 2-year-old was born. When Malachi was born, she started showing those signs. And then when you add yet another baby, it's like, for her, she's like, I had to share my time with the 2-year-old. And now there's this new baby who unfortunately has a lot of medical issues. So he needs not just typical newborn attention, but he also needs, a lot of medical attention as well. So, so now not only is she sharing me with the 2-year-old, she's sharing me with the 5-month-old, and she feels like there's no time left for her. So yeah, I'm really experiencing that in our house with, siblings as well.
It has to be really difficult. I just have one, and my son is 22, so I didn't have to deal with that in terms of having any other kids. He has 2 brothers on his dad's side, but he didn't really grow up in the house with them, so he didn't really experience that. If anything, he has the opposite, where he's used to being the only child, so he doesn't really have to wait for things like he would have if his siblings lived in the house with him.
Right. And see, that's the thing that we're saying with Scott here. So Scott is actually the youngest member of the family. So he didn't ever have to deal with pregnancy in his family and like being pushed aside, like Trinity and Malachi and even the other children that you have, Tori, felt, with 6 of them, I'm sure each one of them felt that each time something happened, So, he never had to feel that. I never did, because I was an only child. So I didn't understand either when my kids started showing, this anger. They were all 3 years apart. So I have 3, and it's 3 years between the 2 oldest and 3 years and 3 years between the middle and the youngest. So 6 years on the end between the 2, the oldest and the youngest. So, each one of them kind of felt the same thing, but they each got like their own little specific time, because I didn't have my kids one on top of the other, but so anyway, him not having to deal with pregnancy, he never had to deal with that. He never experienced that. So he, becoming a parent, for him, and seeing his wife begin to start to put someone else before him was very jarring for him. He'd never had to deal with something like that. He was the baby and the only boy, and so he was really, put on a high pedestal. And then beyond that, though, some of Scott's issues with becoming a parent could very well stem back to, his mom, especially, because Jackie was not a stranger to problems. She actually gave away a few of her children for adoption when things got rough, and this may have set in the idea in Scott's mind that you just get rid of anything and anyone you don't want in your life, so, and it wasn't just one child, it was a couple of children, and they knew about it. The other kids knew. So I thought that was very interesting in the fact that set a precedent for him to think, oh, well, if I don't want it anymore, then just get rid of everybody. And so according to Dr. Ludwig, Scott, on an unconscious level, he believed that unwanted individuals should be disposed of. In walks Amber Fry, and just as quick as a gust of wind, Lacey and Connor need to be disposed of. And I'm not saying that he was passionately in love with Amber. I think he was passionately in love with the idea of Amber, and that she was, she really liked him, and she was cute, and everything that he originally wanted in Lacey, and then she became pregnant, and that's not, to him, that's not, attractive, because he's not like the guy who thinks that, oh, she's got such a beautiful glow. That's not him. He's like, oh, this baby is going to take over our lives, so, and I think that if I believe correctly, Amber had a child, but the child was already a little bit older. And so I think it was attractive to him to be able to kind of be like the conquering hero for the kid, but the kid was already to a point where, it would be more self-sufficient than like a baby, so she would be able to spend more time doting on him. So ultimately, though, Amber was the one who sinks Scott's ship. The tape-recorded conversations between them were shocking. They clearly showed how manipulative Scott could be and how well he could lie. And the lies were plentiful. He laid it on thick. Sometimes he'd sound distraught and broken, and other times he sounded on top of the world and without a care in the world. And truthfully, that is exactly what he felt. By getting rid of Lacey and Connor, he is a bachelor again, free to traipse off to Paris on a moment's notice. And so he played that fantasy out for Amber to see, trying to once again use his charms and charisma to carry him through and ignore the truth of what was playing out in front of him. And he never even imagined he'd get caught, because he had always gotten away with everything his whole life, and he knew nothing of facing consequences. So he put on the face of the distraught husband, but his emotions were fake and blatantly inappropriate. His story never added up, and it changed as he became more and more trapped in it. But you can't escape your own behaviors, and Scott's were incredibly bizarre. So Scott's major concerns were not Lacey, Detective Al Brocchini said in a previous interview with People. His major concerns were his car door hitting his other car door in the driveway, or me taking a picture of this boat in his shop, or getting a receipt for the pink slipper and sunglasses the tracking dog people used for Lacey's scent. And he was concerned about the wrong things on Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. His lies were not only to escape prosecution, but to create a fake sense of relief in himself. He didn't mean to kill Lacey. I do believe that. I don't think he actually meant to kill Lacey. Like, I don't think he set out to just do it. But I think the ever-looming, impeding doom he felt of the baby getting closer and closer to being his new reality, he snapped. He probably flew into a rage, and the reason for all of his insecurities of his life was exterminated in his mind, and he was free to be whatever he wanted. He didn't think of Connor in this, because in his mind, Connor wasn't even a thing yet. He hadn't breathed life. He hadn't become a real human. And so to him, it was no issue to rid himself of the burden of something that wasn't even real yet. So I've obviously made my point that much of what I'm basing my beliefs about this case on is not emotion or questionable timelines or inaccurate eyewitness accounts. All of those things are readily available, and depending on what way you look at it, they can prove or disprove just about any theory you present on either side of the fence. My basis for this comes down to psychological and behavioral facts that, when evaluated, leave little to speculation. These are textbook psychological and behavioral occurrences. The lying and Scott's actions play a big part in the truth. So there was an overwhelming amount of lies and strange behavior. And so, one of the things was, thinking about this, I thought this was kind of funny. I'm going to say it in a funny way. So I did not have sex with that woman. This wasn't a lie that worked very well for Bill Clinton, and it didn't fare any better for Scott. So while having an adulterous relationship, again, I said it's not always a recipe for murder, but in some cases it is. However, my basis for bringing this up is less about the affair and instead, as I stated before, the lies he told. And it's not just that he lied, it's with the ease in which he lied. Now, my counterpart, Colleen, told you that he didn't lie about anything when it came to the murder. But how do we know that? We don't. He could have lied about any number of things. Where he was, what he planned when telling Amber his wife was dead and he was spending his first Christmas alone, whether Lacey actually knew about the boat that he had. The list goes on, and without Lacey here to refute anything he says, then it's a toss-up of whether to believe a habitual liar who does it with such ease and quickness or not. So I'm not sure about you, but not in the history of ever. And remember, I'm a Cali girl, so I should probably know about how swimming in a pool or ocean would affect a person's hair color. But never have I ever seen what happened to Scott's hair happen as a result of swimming. And that was his explanation. Is it possible for the sun and chlorine in a pool to lighten hair color? Yeah, absolutely it is. Is it ever, and I mean ever, to the extent in which his changed? Hell no. Any color hair can change from prolonged exposure to swimming pool water. The key word there being
Calling all night owls. When you've got the After Dark munchies, Amigos is here for you to satisfy your late night cravings. Put your hunger to bed with Amigos' new 8 to close specials. Only $5 for 2 crisp meat burritos, 2 cheesy burritos, or 1 of each, for those who can't decide. You heard right. 2 of our favorite late night sellers, crisp meats or cheesies for just $5. Head to Amigos, where flavor never sleeps.
Blonde. Now, blonde hair gets a green tint to it because it is lighter than Scott's dark brown hair and goatee. Some people think it's because of the chlorine, but it is and it isn't. The misconception is that the chlorine is green, but in fact, it's not, and is only a small secondary reason as to why this change occurs. The green hue is actually caused by the metals in the water, mostly copper to be exact. The copper lodges itself in the outer parts of the hair, known as the cuticle. And the cuticle is the outside coating of the hair that protects it. But frequent swimming breaks down the cuticle, allowing the metals in the water to attach to the hair. Once they're there, they oxidize, kind of like rusting, and oxidized copper is green. Incidentally, that's why the Statue of Liberty is green and why old pennies are sometimes green. The copper in them has oxidized. So chlorine's role in this is that it helps damage your hair's cuticle. So after a swim in chlorinated water, most people's hair looks very dull and dry. This is usually due to the removal of oils that coat the hair to give it a shiny look. And certainly chlorine is a very powerful remover of hair lipids. But no, it would not in any way cause the drastic change that Scott and his supporters claim happened. The man bleached his hair to change his appearance. Now, whether that was because he was planning a run for the border or just because he got tired of being called a murderer when he went out in public, we're never going to know for sure. But it does look with the rest of the psychological factors presented here as pretty compelling. And again, it highlights the lies he thinks he can tell, and people will just believe him.
I do want to interject here and say, like, my hair, okay, I need to update it. We're in the middle of a pandemic, but my hair is purple and gray right now, but purple. So, and I read somewhere, actually fairly recently, that when you see women that change their hair color, Whether it's to go from blonde to brown or dirty blonde to, a platinum blonde, that it's because of something in their life that they're unhappy with, that they want to change and just can't. And so they change their hair color. And that the more drastic the change, the more drastic that trauma or that something is in their life that they're really trying to run from.
Absolutely. And I could say that definitely could be a reason. It could have been a reason. It also could have been a reason that he was going to, run for the border, as I'm going to put out here in a few minutes. But my main point is he told everyone it was because of exposed, long periods of exposure to pool water. And there is no world in which we live in that pool water would do to his hair and his beard, his little goatee, what it did. There's just no world. That doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. And if I'm wrong, if there are hairdressers out there listening to me and I am wrong, please let me know. But I did get this from a scientific journal. I looked it up to see about how logical this could be. And I found this information, and this is what I'm going by. So, it is a scientific fact of what happens to different types of hair when they're exposed to, pool water or extreme amounts of sunlight in pool water, but never, his hair might have lightened a few shades down to like a dirty blonde or even gotten dull where it wasn't shiny anymore or anything, but never would it go to bleach blonde. And that his hair was almost white. Like, that's how blonde his hair was. And you cannot tell me that that's from swimming. I'm sorry. I've swum a lot in my life, and I have red hair, which has a brown tint to it. That has never happened to me, ever. Not ever. So anyway, moving on. I'm going to talk about him. So on April 18th, 2003, Scott was arrested, and the contents of his car were suspicious at best. Again, the defense wants us to believe it's all some strange coincidence, but I just don't believe that at all. 3 days prior to Scott's arrest, Lacey and Connor's bodies washed up on the shore in the San Francisco Bay. When he was pulled over, he told the police that he was heading out to golf with his father and brother. However, no golf clubs were found in the car. And I'm sorry, if my missing wife after 6 months and my baby were just found dead in the San Francisco Bay, I don't think that I would be heading out for a lovely day of golfing with my brother and my father. Just saying. I don't know. Anyway, what was found in the car was beyond suspicious. There were 4 cell phones, $350 worth of newly purchased camping gear, including a water purifier and a tent, 10 Viagra, and 200 sleeping pills, $15,000 in cash, tons of credit cards, and not just his, but both some from his mother and his sister, both his ID and that of his half-brother John, 6 pairs of shoes, enough socks and underwear for weeks, a wardrobe that would last a long time, a Mercedes-Benz handgun registered to his mother, a dagger, 15 laminated missing person flyers for Lacey, a map to Amber's workplace, bags packed full of toiletries, binders from his work, a diving mask and snorkel, binoculars, a small hatchet, switchblades and razor blades, a shovel, work gloves, and a picture of him and his wife from happier times, and a partridge in a pear tree. No, but that's a lot of shit in your car if you're not planning to, I don't know, take a drive somewhere so that you can't be arrested. Just saying. In addition,
I'm lucky to have $20 cash in my car.
Exactly. Thank you. There's days that I'm picking up change to go put gas in my car, but $15,000 in cash, my God, who even carries that around? I don't think millionaires carry that around, because who would want to be, carrying that around? You could get carjacked, you could get it jacked for your wallet, and then you lose $15,000. I don't know anyone that's carrying that unless you're planning to go somewhere where you're going to need money for a little while and you can't access a bank account. But in addition to the large amount of clothing in the car, there were also credit cards belonging to his mother and sister. Prior to being stopped, Scott was also leading police on a fast and furious chase that could have very well turned fatal. Can you say OJ? He was driving 80 miles an hour on a freeway, and he would slam his brakes on and pull over, said lead investigator Alan Brochini. And then it got to the point where we had a helicopter lost him. Either he's going to kill somebody, or one of these agents they're trying to follow him are going to get killed or kill someone else. So it seems to me that along with the new appearances of his blonde hair and his blonde beard were the makings of a man on the run. There's no way on earth he can justify all those contents, nor his lie of the swimmer's hair snafu. I'm sorry. I can't. Another big contention point for people is the meringue cookies evidence. Scott claimed on the morning of Christmas Eve that Lacey was watching her favorite show, Martha Stewart, and that the guest and Martha were discussing meringue cookies. This split in the two stories proved epic in the case, but the truth is that both sides are right and both sides are wrong about the mention of meringue. This was originally seen as a grave error for the prosecution, but the defense basically fixed their mess and handed it back to them all nice and neat on a silver platter. Now, I never saw this as a lie about the meringue or not, but in the actual evidence, it's a misrepresentation of the timeline. The confusion of the cookies was that on Martha's December 23rd episode, she and guest Bill Yasis baked up a batch of pastries covered with chocolate meringue, right about the 40-minute mark. However, on December 24th, the Christmas Eve show, Martha and guest baked lemon butter cookies and prepared chapinao, a fish stew of sorts. She was not baking anything with meringue, however, and it was an error on the prosecution side at 9:48 a.m. on Christmas Eve. There was a mention of meringue. The significance of this was that the defense tried to use it as a way to show shoddy investigations on the part of the prosecution and law enforcement. But in all reality, what it did was move the timeline from the 9:30 a.m. mark that Scott claimed he departed his home to a whole 18 minutes later at 9:48 a.m., narrowing the margin of time as to when Lacey disappeared.
Don't go anywhere. The Good Wives will be right back. Every great podcast needs a great website. Currently, our mother company, Mad Ginger Entertainment, is building their website using Bluehost. Bluehost is one of the best and most affordable web hosting platforms available. Plans start as low as $2.95 a month, and you can even integrate it with WordPress. So if you need your own website or affordable web hosting, grab our discount link in the description and get your podcast a bigger presence online at low costs.
Hey guys, it's me, Cajun Mama Ty, and I'm here with our French phrase of the day. So as the Good Wives continue on with their debate with the Scott Peterson case, I have chosen this week to talk about Scott Peterson's ex-mistress, Amber Fry. I feel kind of sorry for Amber because she did not know that Scott was married. Amber's name is Amber Dawn Fry. She was the mistress of Scott Peterson, who is currently on death row. He's a convicted felon of killing his wife Lacey and their unborn child Connor in 2002. Amber was born in February of 1975, and she went to high school, graduated from high school. She got an associate's degree in child development. She became a massage therapist, where she currently practices in Fresno, California. She has been married twice and has 2 children. She met Scott Peterson at a party over the Thanksgiving holidays. Their relationship lasted about 6 weeks. He did lie to her on several occasions. Amber Fry was one of the lead people who helped in prosecuting Scott Peterson. She testified on the prosecution's behalf, and she really did a good job. And today I have my words for her. She was a mistress with a broken heart because she truly loved Scott. So she is maîtresse au cœur brûlé. That is Amber Fry, a mistress with a broken heart. Maîtresse au cœur brûlé. That's the French word of the day. Let's head back to the Good Wives as they continue on debating about Scott Peterson's innocence or guilty. And I'll be back with my recipe, and we'll see y'all then.
So I've given you a lot to ponder in this episode, and I'd like to leave you with one last thought before you come back next week for our season finale and find out how you can win a special gift from the Good Wives for telling us your thoughts on the verdict of Scotty P. This is from a crime show that my team and I, especially Tori, have been working on for some time called Sens. Funny enough, it's our defense attorney's opening statement in our trial. It's a bit of a sleazeball who dons a false Southern lawyer accent that you clearly tell is fake from a mile away. But man, if this little passage didn't sum up this case. So, the prosecution's case, and this is I'm reading from our script now, guys. The prosecution's case reminds me of a friend of mine, a lawyer who needed a new suit for court. And so he went to the store and told his salesman, I got me a case coming up and I need to look my best. The salesman said, no problem, and brought him a fine pair of pants. My friend put them on, said, handsome pants, but they're just a tad long. Nonsense, the salesman said. Just put your hand here and pull them up a tad. But, the salesman brought out a shirt, jacket, tie, all beautiful pieces, but everything just a little off. Kept saying, oh, just bend your shoulders back a little more, and oh, just slouch a tad bit more. So my friend bought the suit and went to court all twisted up. And the jury listened. And you know what they said? They said, oh, look how he's standing. Was he in a wreck? But ain't that just the most beautiful suit? Over the course of the trial, he lost, by the way. You'll see that the prosecution's case is like my friend's suit. Nothing fits, but it looks damn good if you stand just right. So the same could be said for the defense side of the Peterson case. Sure, if you slapped an oversized suit on Scott and twisted and contort the truth and ask him to stand just the right way, you might be able to convince a few people, Colleen, he's innocent. But in all reality, when you strip away all the antics and you look at the very basics of the case, the psychological aspects, the motives, the lies, the suspect, and the victims, it all becomes crystal clear that Scott Peterson is guilty. And whether he deserves the death penalty or not is a conversation for a different day.
No questions. I'm very glad you mentioned the meringue situation, though, because that was a big issue I had.
It was a big
timing.
issue. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it actually ended up screwing them. If they had never really brought it up, it wouldn't have been a big issue.
Yeah, that's a big difference in that timeline.
18 minutes. Yep. And Colleen, I think, said something about the fact that he said 9:30 to 10. He didn't. He said 9:30. He said 9:30. And that is 18 minutes is a big deal.
If I'm not, I could be wrong. If I'm not mistaken, there was also a phone call at 10:08 a.m., which placed him really close to the house.
Yes.
Which cuts the timeline even shorter.
Right. I'm sorry. I don't see it. I don't see what she sees.
Thanks so much for tuning in and dishing true crime with the Good Wives.
Don't forget to join our Patreon member club to get the full recipe shared tonight, inside documents and pictures from the case, bonus mini podcast episodes, live YouTube discussion, and an exclusive invitation to our discussion group on Facebook, and get some amazing Good Wives merch.
Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at True Crime Wives. And for more inside information, check us out on YouTube at Murder by Design, where we're currently talking about a few different true crime cases, from bullying murders to serial killers. We dish it all.
Have a good one from the Good Wives, serving up true crime, one dish at a time.
Calling all night owls. When you've got the After Dark munchies, Amigos is here for you to satisfy your late night cravings. Put your hunger to bed with Amigos' new 8 to close specials. Only $5 for 2 crisp meat burritos, 2 cheesy burritos, or 1 of each, for those who can't decide. You heard right. 2 of our favorite late night sellers, crisp meats or cheesies, for just $5. Head to Amigos, where flavor never sleeps.
When you download the Baker's app, you have easy access to savings every day. Get the most out of weekly sales and receive personalized coupons to save on your favorite items, all while earning 1 fuel point for every $1 spent. Baker's makes it easy to save while you shop, whether it's in-store or online, so you get the most value out of every trip, every time. Download the Baker's app now to save big on your next purchase. Baker's, fresh for everyone. Must have a digital account to redeem offers. Restrictions may apply. See site for details.